Imagine the dazzling lights, the roaring crowds, and the electrifying thrill of performing with some of the most powerful and majestic creatures on Earth. The spotlight shines brightly on you, the crowd is captivated, and every movement you make is filled with precision and grace. Your bond with these animals is stronger than most human relationships, a connection forged through years of trust, patience, and understanding. For years, you revel in the fame, the fortune, and the thrill of knowing that you've mastered the impossible. But then, in a single instant, everything changes. The bond that once seemed unbreakable snaps, and the very creatures you have devoted your life to turn against you in a moment of overwhelming force. What had once been a symbol of triumph becomes a brutal reminder of the raw power that lies within the wild. The outcome? A horrifying tale of survival, tragedy, and loss that nobody could have predicted. This was the harsh reality for 4 performers whose lives were forever altered when their trusted circus animals turned deadly. In each of their stories, one wrong move, one change in behavior, and everything spirals out of control, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. November 27, 2016, Alexandria Lion Village, Egypt. The stage was set, and the audience waited with bated breath. Families, tourists, and locals had gathered in the arena, eager to witness the much-anticipated lion taming performance. For years, the Lion Village had been known for its thrilling animal shows, with Islam Shaheen at the forefront. A seasoned lion tamer, Islam had spent 13 years commanding the ring and forging an intimate bond with the majestic beasts he trained. His connection with the lions was both professional and personal, built on mutual respect and understanding, something few could achieve with such wild, powerful creatures. At 35 years old, Islam was no stranger to the inherent dangers of his profession. The stakes were always high when working with such powerful predators, and the consequences of one small mistake could be catastrophic. But Islam's confidence was unwavering. He was known for his precision, his calm demeanor, and his deep respect for the animals he worked with. His expertise had earned him the admiration of his colleagues and the respect of the audience. His reputation as one of the best in the business was well-deserved, with his flawless performances becoming a trademark of the park. However, that night would be different. The performance began without issue. Islam stepped into the ring, and 3 lions joined him in the act, each performing their routine with the kind of discipline that came from years of training. The crowd watched in awe as the lions leapt through hoops, balanced on platforms, and showed off their razor-sharp teeth. The lions' synchronized movements, the perfect harmony of man and beast, were a testament to Islam's skill. But one lion, a new addition to the group, behaved differently. Unlike the others, this lion lingered at the edge of the ring, its eyes locked onto Islam. There was something unsettling about its gaze, but the trainers proceeded with the performance, unaware of the growing danger. The new lion, a massive male recently imported from South Africa, had been showing signs of aggression before the performance. It had attacked another trainer months earlier, but management had dismissed it as an isolated incident, confident that the lion would settle into the routine. However, the tension in the air was palpable as Islam guided one of the lions up a ladder. The new lion's muscles tensed, and in an instant, it leapt toward Islam with the force of a freight train. The crowd erupted into screams as the lion landed on Islam, its claws sinking into his flesh. The trainers sprang into action, desperately trying to pry the animal off. But the lion's instincts had taken over, and it refused to release its grip. Islam was dragged across the ring, blood staining the concrete floor. The audience was frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the brutality of what they were witnessing. The force with which the lion struck Islam was unmatched, as though it was no longer recognizing the human in front of it. The trainers continued to strike the lion with their sticks, but the animal's ferocity was too much. It shook its head violently, its jaws locking tighter around Islam's neck. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the lion released its grip and retreated, its jaws dripping with blood. Islam's body was limp, and the trainers rushed to his side, lifting him out of the ring and calling for emergency help. The chaos in the arena was palpable, with spectators too stunned to act, some frozen in horror,
others screaming in panic as the gravity of the situation set in. Islam was rushed to Andalusian Salam Hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to save him. His injuries were severe: a fractured skull, deep lacerations, and significant internal bleeding. Despite their best efforts, Islam passed away 2 days later. The news of his death spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through the community and beyond. His loss left an irreplaceable gap and highlighted the unpredictable dangers of working with wild animals. Islam was admired not only for his remarkable skill, but also for his deep affection and respect for the animals he trained, qualities that ultimately led to his tragic end. In the aftermath of the attack, authorities initiated an investigation. While park officials speculated that the lion's aggression might have been triggered by mating season, critics cited the poor living conditions at the park as a contributing factor. The incident reignited debates about the ethics of using wild animals for entertainment and the inherent risks involved. Islam's death underscored the raw, uncontrollable power of the creatures he worked with, a force that could not be tamed, no matter how skilled the trainer. While the bond between man and beast had turned tragic for Islam Shaheen in the lion's den, the same unbreakable connection would prove to be equally volatile for another performer in the heart of Las Vegas. Roy Horn, one half of the famed Siegfried and Roy duo, had spent years cultivating a flawless act with his beloved animals. But on one fateful night, the world would witness how quickly a moment of trust could transform into a devastating loss. October 3rd, 2003, Las Vegas, Nevada. The Mirage Hotel and Casino was alive with the vibrant energy that only Vegas could provide. The stage was set for one of the most iconic performances in the city, Siegfried and Roy's legendary magic and animal show. The duo, known for their larger-than-life performances that blended illusions and live exotic animals, had captivated audiences for over a decade. Their show had become a symbol of wonder, skill, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. Roy Horn, one half of the famous duo, stepped onto the stage with Manticore, a 400-pound white tiger who had been part of the act for years. The audience was mesmerized by the tiger's grace and power, its sleek white coat gleaming under the stage lights. The performance was flawless until the moment it all unraveled. In a moment of miscommunication, Roy attempted to correct Manticore's behavior by tapping him on the nose with a microphone. But instead of retreating, Manticore suddenly lunged at Roy, knocking him to the ground. The crowd, unsure whether this was part of the act or a dangerous break from the illusion, was paralyzed in fear. The tiger's massive paws pinned Roy to the ground as it sank its teeth into his neck. Blood poured onto the stage, and screams erupted from the audience. The shock was overwhelming, as this act of aggression seemed completely out of character for Manticore, who had always been a central, beloved figure in their performances. Trainers rushed in, using fire extinguishers to try to break the tiger's grip, but the animal's strength was overwhelming. It dragged Roy across the stage, his body limp and bloodied. Manticore's power was unmatched, and despite the frantic attempts of the crew, the tiger's grip only tightened. The audience remained stunned, unable to process the sudden, terrifying shift from a dazzling performance to raw, violent danger. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Manticore released Roy and retreated, but the damage was done. The crowd was left in shock, unable to comprehend the scene they'd just witnessed. The illusion of control that Siegfried and Roy had so carefully crafted over the years had shattered, and what was once a harmonious bond with the animals now stood in sharp contrast to the brutal violence on stage. The trainers attempted to regain control of the situation, but the raw terror of what unfolded on stage left everyone frozen in disbelief. Roy was immediately rushed to the University Medical Center, where surgeons worked tirelessly to stabilize him. His injuries were severe: a crushed windpipe, a severed jugular vein, and massive blood loss. Despite multiple surgeries and close calls with death, Roy survived, but the attack left him permanently impaired. He lost much of his motor function, and his speech was heavily affected. The career that had defined him for so many years would never be the same. Roy's physical recovery was slow, and the mental and emotional toll was equally profound.
The act that had made him a household name was now marked by the scars of that fateful night. The attack sent shockwaves through Las Vegas and the entertainment world. Animal rights groups renewed calls for the retirement of performing animals, and the investigation into the incident sparked a fierce debate over the ethics of working with such powerful creatures. Roy later suggested that Manticore had been attempting to protect him, but the explanation was met with skepticism. Some believed it was a result of stress, while others wondered if the bond between the two had frayed in such a dangerous moment. What followed was a media frenzy that shook the entertainment world. The famed duo's fall from grace marked the end of an era for animal performance in mainstream entertainment. The legacy they had built was overshadowed by the brutal reality of what happened that fateful night. Siegfried and Roy's show, once a dazzling symbol of human-animal harmony, would forever be linked to that moment of violence that no one could have predicted. For Roy Horn, the bond with his tiger had shattered in a terrifying instant, altering his life forever. But as we had seen, the bond between trainers and their animals could sometimes go awry in the most unexpected of ways. In the world of circus performance, where such animals were trusted with the lives of their trainers, Alexander Crispin Suarez faced a tragic fate of his own, proving that the dangers lurking behind the spectacle were not always as easily controlled. February 2nd, 2013. The Suarez Brothers Circus set up its colorful tents in Echojoa, Sonora, Mexico, with families and children eagerly awaiting the evening's performance. The air was thick with excitement as the crowd gathered, their faces lit by the bright lights that adorned the tent. Among the performers was 35-year-old Alexander Crispin Suarez, an animal trainer known for his daring acts with Bengal tigers. Alexander had grown up in the circus world, born into a family of performers. From an early age, he was drawn to the Bengal tigers, whose power and grace fascinated him. By his 20s, Alexander had earned a reputation as a top trainer in the circus world, building a deep bond with the tigers. His calm demeanor, combined with his understanding of animal behavior, set him apart from others in the industry. His act had become the highlight of the show, and the audience admired the way the tigers obeyed his every command. On this particular evening, the atmosphere was electric. The audience buzzed with excitement as the lights dimmed, and Alexander stepped into the ring with 2 Bengal tigers, one male and one female. The performance began smoothly, with the tigers leaping through hoops, performing spins, and completing a series of synchronized tricks. The crowd marveled at the bond between man and beast, watching in awe as Alexander guided them effortlessly through each maneuver. The act was a masterpiece of coordination, grace, and trust. The tigers responded with perfect precision, their movements a reflection of years of training, and the audience was captivated. However, as the performance continued, something began to feel off. The male tiger, larger and more dominant, began to act strangely. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with something more aggressive. His eyes, once filled with obedience, seemed to take on a wild, feral edge. His body language shifted, his tail flicked nervously, his muscles tensed. Alexander noticed the change but pressed on, trying to maintain control of the performance. He knew this tiger well, and he trusted that the bond they had built would hold. The tension in the air was palpable, and the audience, sensing the change in the animal, fell silent. As Alexander directed the male tiger to jump onto a raised platform, the animal paused. Its eyes locked on Alexander's, and for a moment there was an uncomfortable stillness. Then, without warning, the tiger lunged. In a split second, the audience's gasps turned into screams of horror. The tiger knocked Alexander to the ground with incredible force, its powerful claws digging into his legs. The audience, initially unsure if this was part of the act, quickly realized the danger unfolding before them. Panic spread through the crowd as the tiger dragged Alexander across the ring. The circus staff rushed in, wielding metal poles and sticks in a desperate attempt to free him, but the tiger's grip was unyielding. The audience watched in terror as blood stained the floor, and Alexander fought to break free. The once graceful performance had turned into a brutal fight for survival. The sound of the struggle, the frantic shouts of the crew and the raw terror of the audience made the moment even more horrifying. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the tiger released its grip. It retreated to the corner of the ring, its eyes wild and unfocused. Alexander lay motionless on the floor, bloodied and battered. The circus staff rushed to his side, and emergency services were called immediately. The audience, still in shock, watched as Alexander was carried from the ring, some in disbelief, others in tears, unable to process what had just happened. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Alexander's injuries were too severe. He had suffered massive blood loss, deep lacerations, and internal injuries. He was rushed to the hospital, but he died shortly after arriving. His death sent shockwaves through the circus community. The grief felt by his family, friends, and colleagues was immense, and the loss of such a skilled and beloved performer left a void that could never be filled. The tragedy sparked debates about the ethics of using wild animals in performances. While some speculated that the tiger's aggression could have been triggered by stress or illness, others pointed to the inherent risks of working with such powerful creatures. The bond between Alexander and the tiger, once thought unbreakable, had been shattered in an instant, and the circus world was left to grapple with the harsh realities of working with wild animals. Alexander had always worked with the utmost care and respect for his animals, but even that bond couldn't prevent the unforeseen tragedy. In the aftermath of Alexander's death, the Suarez brothers' circus faced intense scrutiny. The tragedy highlighted the unpredictable nature of wild animals, even after years of training and trust. The incident left behind not only a deep sense of loss, but a permanent shift in how the bond between man and beast would be viewed in the years to come. The circus world, once filled with awe and admiration for trainers and their animals, was now forced to confront the dangers that lurked behind the spectacle. The life-or-death moments that defined Alexander Crispin Suarez's career as a tiger trainer came to a devastating end, reminding everyone of the unpredictability of wild animals. But while these tragedies unfolded on stage, they also reached far beyond the spotlight. In a quiet German forest, Maximilian, a retired engineer, would unknowingly cross paths with an elephant whose escape would set off a series of tragic events. What began as a tranquil morning walk soon erupted into a brutal encounter, revealing the unpredictable peril of wild animals, even in the quietest of settings. June 13, 2015. The small town of Buchen, Germany, woke to a serene morning. Sunlight filtered through the dense trees of the forest that surrounded the quiet streets. Maximilian, a 65-year-old retired engineer, stepped out for his usual morning walk. With a trash bag in hand, he intended to clear any litter along the paths. It was a routine he had followed since his retirement a year earlier. Maximilian had always been a fixture in the town, known for his quiet demeanor and care for the environment. He had become somewhat of a local legend, not just for his hard work, but for his genuine kindness. People often saw him picking up trash along the trails, stopping to chat with those he met, or simply taking in the beauty of the forest that had become his sanctuary. Maximilian had worked as an engineer for many years, but since his retirement, he had embraced the peaceful solitude of his walks. His attention to detail and care for the environment earned him respect from the townspeople. He took pride in his daily walks, ensuring the trails were clean and offering a friendly word to the neighbors he met along the way. His presence was calming, and many townspeople considered him a friend. The circus had arrived a few days earlier, setting up colorful tents at the edge of town. Circus Luna, a small traveling show, had its star attraction, Baby, a massive 34-year-old African elephant. Baby had performed in circuses across Europe, captivating audiences with her size. Despite her fame, Baby's past was tainted. In 2012, she had struck a young boy with her trunk, breaking his jaw. The incident caused controversy, but Baby remained a central part of the circus act. Her sheer size and power made her an unforgettable part of the performance, but there were whispers about her unpredictable behavior. That morning, Baby had just finished her routine. After the show, the handlers led her back to her enclosure, but someone had tampered with the lock, leaving the gate ajar. Baby, always alert, noticed the opportunity for escape and wandered off into the forest. Maximilian had no idea that his peaceful walk would be interrupted. As he strolled along the familiar trail, enjoying the quiet of the morning, he rounded a bend and found himself face to face with Baby. The sight of the enormous elephant standing nearby left Maximilian frozen in place. Baby, startled, let out a loud trumpet. The sound reverberated through the trees, startling Maximilian further. Maximilian scrambled to move, but Baby charged forward, slamming one of her enormous feet down onto his back. The force was overwhelming. Maximilian's spine and ribs shattered instantly under the weight. He collapsed, motionless. Baby, in her panic, backed away and disappeared deeper into the woods, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves behind. The once peaceful, tranquil forest was now filled with the echoes of violence, and the quiet town of Buchan would never be the same. The quiet forest that had once offered Maximilian peace was now filled with the horrifying aftermath of an accident no one could have foreseen. It wasn't until hours later that his body was found. The peaceful retirement that Maximilian had embraced had ended in the most unimaginable way, a victim of an unprovoked attack by a frightened animal. The townspeople, who had always known him as a gentle, kind figure, were in disbelief. The tragedy felt like a nightmare that had suddenly become a grim reality. The circus staff realized Baby was missing during their morning rounds and contacted local authorities. A search began, and Baby was found in the woods hours later, coaxed back to the circus. But by then, it was too late. Maximilian's body had been discovered, and the town was left to mourn the loss of a kind man who had spent his retirement caring for the community. The circus was halted, and a somber atmosphere descended on the normally cheerful town. An investigation revealed the gate to Baby's enclosure had been tampered with, though the person responsible was never found. Some speculated that the individual had intended to free the animals, acting out of misplaced compassion. The circus moved Baby to a different facility, Safari Park Stukenbrock, but the tragic incident cast a dark shadow over the community. Maximilian's death, a victim of an unexpected tragedy, left behind a lasting sign of the unpredictability of working with wild animals and the potential dangers lurking when boundaries are crossed. Conclusion: the tragic stories of Islam Shaheen, Roy Horn, Alexander Crispin Suarez, and Maximilian highlight the unpredictable and dangerous nature of working with wild animals, no matter how deep the bond may seem. These incidents, whether on stage or in everyday life, show how quickly a moment of trust can turn to catastrophe. While these performers dedicated their lives to mastering the art of working with powerful creatures, their fates underscore the fine line between awe and danger, urging us to reconsider the ethics and risks of using animals for entertainment.